The man tapped to oversee all Catholic doctrine and who was accused of covering up sex abuse is explaining the cover-up. Joining us with Vatican News, Church Militant's pinch hit, Rome correspondent, Dr. William Mahoney. William, Pope Francis talks a lot about zero tolerance regarding clerical sex abuse, but just elevated another prelate who seemingly protected a sexual predator. What do we know about this case?
I mean, when he was in Argentina, he was the Archbishop of La Plata, and there was a priest, Father, I think it's Eduardo was his first name, Lorenzo. There were abuse allegations of him, and they came forward again, I think, in 2008. And the bishop there, as the Archbishop of La Plata, he basically covered up for this man. The man was Lorenzo. Father Lorenzo was finally, there was a warrant for his arrest, and he committed suicide. And then even after his death, the bishop just kept covering for him.
Okay, so what exactly now that Fernandez is? You were talking about Archbishop Fernandez. He's the guy that the Pope tapped for the CDF, which is now the DDF, the Dicastery of the Doctrine of the Faith. What is he actually saying about his role in the cover-up?
Well, he's saying that he would do things differently now. I actually have some quotes here. I'm just going to read you a couple of quotes from him. He said, "Today I would certainly act very differently, and certainly my performance was insufficient." Another quote from him, he says, "I cannot say that I have committed a crime or something against what was established at that time. I was waiting to see how justice acted, what the persecutor did, what objective elements came to us." End quote, and stuff like that. So he's basically saying, well, the rules were different at the time, and I didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't, and even when this Father Lorenzo, he was under arrest, and when he committed suicide, and still the bishop wouldn't concede that maybe the law enforcement had something.
Yeah, it's interesting how he says, I wanted to see what objective, stuff that they had, they could bring forward, kind of where the priests are, where the bishops are today. What dirt do you actually have on this person, and how compelling is it? Also, he's up about the people are saying that he didn't talk to the victims at all. There was 5 different victims at the time who came forward, and he didn't address them or acknowledge them. What are folks who track such priest predators and bishops who cover for them? Are they buying Fernandez's sorry not sorry explanation?
No, not at all. One very good article is on bishop accountability by Doyle. Ann Doyle, I think is her first name. She has a very good article explaining this and how no one's buying it. He never spoke to any of the victims. He just covered for the priest, and even after the priest was found guilty enough to arrest with a warrant, he still just kept covering for him after he committed suicide, covered for him. So nobody's buying this. One more interesting thing I just point out there, La Plata was also the place where the Provolo Institute is located, and this is probably, people might remember from a few years back, there was a huge scandal there because it's an institute for deaf children, and the priests there were abusing these deaf children because they're so vulnerable. They were really, really horrible abuse. Now, this didn't happen on his watch, but some of those allegations were coming forward somewhere around that time when he was the Archbishop, and I never heard a word about that or anything, him looking into that or anything, so.
Yeah, that was a huge story. We did cover that on Church Militant's site, I think in 2018. We were reporting on that. Well, shifting gears for just a moment, because Fernandez now, he's going to be in September actually the head of the DDF, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. He's going to be the watchdog of doctrine for the Universal Church. How is he on principles, doctrine? He made some recent statements about possibly setting aside the church's ban on blessing same-sex unions, which actually came from the DDF in March of 2021, and he's going to be heading that same DDF, the dicastery there, in September. Tell us about what he had to say.
I mean, this is the same guy who wrote the book in 1995, The Art of Kissing, right? This is a priest writing this book, so it's just a trashy, sleazy book. And he's made it pretty clear. He seems to be gunning for humane vitae. He seems to want to relax all these laws on sexual morality. He did specifically about the blessing homosexual couples. He said that it was something that needed to be examined, and treaded. He like kind of said like treaded carefully, but something that needed to be examined. But of course, there's nothing to examine. I mean, it's clear you can't do that. The church has made that clear. So he's pretty fuzzy on those things. And like I said, I think he's gunning for humane vitae and everything that follows.
So now Fernandez is actually coming out, like you say, he's going to be revisiting contraception, saying condoms for, women should be able to accept, or he wrote in 2006 an article about women should be able to, use condoms in order to save their marriage. So that's true. He's actually looking at that as well. But Fernandez is coming out and he's saying he's actually going to embrace the current magisterium. In Saturday's interview there, where he made these statements about rolling back blessings on same-sex marriages, he said, "In this matter, as in others, we will have to heed what the Pope asks of me at the end of his letter, asking him to be the head of the DDF, which is for the dicastery's documents to embrace the recent magisterium." That's very, almost like in an echo chamber, a bubble chamber, William, what do you think about defending this or that particular magisterium, seemingly in isolation of the ongoing, continual, universal magisterium of the church, especially in a time when it's this particular magisterium is so full of confusing and ambiguous statements?
Okay, so he's espousing a kind of very odd ultramontanism, which is this everything the Pope says goes. So if Pope Francis likes sausages, well, we need to have sausage day, or whatever. So that's number one. Number two, as far as the magisterium goes, there's some distinctions to be made. So you have the extraordinary magisterium, then you have the ordinary magisterium, which is broken into non-fallible and infallible. So it has to be clear. When the church speaks, when the magisterium is speaking from the non-infallible magisterium, you follow it with respect, of course, but that doesn't mean everything they say is going to be 100% accurate. So you can't just follow the current magisterium. That really doesn't make sense, because the magisterium has to always embrace the 2,000 years of scripture and tradition and former statements. When you have a pope saying something totally outside of that, there's nothing to embrace. It's already clear. The church teaching is already clear. So I think in this case, it's like St. Paul said, "Follow me as I follow Christ." Well, this hasn't changed.
Yeah, in 2004, I think Ratzinger dialed it in when he was the head of the same dicastery that we call it the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, back then the CDF, and he was writing to the American bishops. He was saying, about abortion, you can't actually be a good Catholic and embrace abortion or vote for people who embrace abortion if you're voting for them for that reason. And he said, but you can disagree with the Holy Father, it was John Paul II at the time, on when to wage a just war, or on the particulars of that, or such as when to administer the death penalty, when to actually John Paul II would like almost zero application of the death penalty, but he still defended the fact in principle. And Ratzinger said, there's a gray scale there of what to if you want to agree totally when to, in his prudential judgment on the use of something such as the death penalty. And that was very rolling back this ultramontane mentality that just because the Pope's proclivity on something in matters of prudential judgment, we don't always have to embrace that, and I think we see a lot of that today. One final thing on Fernandez. He was the ghostwriter, they say, for Amoris Laetitia. Can you dial that in for people and exactly your take on Amoris Laetitia and how that's part of the magisterium of St. Francis?
Well, I mean, again, in the Amoris Laetitia, remember there were the cardinals who put out the dubia about when that was launched. There were 4 of them, and the dubia was never answered. So there's serious problems with them with that document. So again, now we come into the magisterium again. Clearly here we're talking about non-infallible magisterium. So this is, if 4 of the cardinals can take issue with what the Pope had to say in that document, and if Archbishop Fernandez helped drafted it, then what he was thinking, then obviously there's wiggle room here. It's not just this, like you said, this ultramontanism that the Pope said it and that's it. No, that's not it. Because what if what he's saying is outside of what the church has already laid down, then
You know, or if it's not outside, at least some people's interpretation of the ambiguity or stretching the equivocations is. Well, you know, we'd like to remind viewers now that St. John Eudes, actually, he lived in the 17th century. He's often quoted as saying the most evident mark of God's anger and the most terrible chastisement he can inflict upon the world are manifested when he permits his people, people of God, to fall into the hands of clerics who are priests more in name than in deed. When God permits such things, such as really in our times it has, it is a very positive proof that he is thoroughly angry with his people. So I'd remind viewers, rather than abandon Christ, our duty is to give the good Lord fewer reasons to inflict his church with bad shepherds, and pray for the shepherds that they be like unto Christ. William, thanks very much for your report and for all your insights.
No, you're welcome, Brad. Thanks for having me.